We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power word, power word, power word. Social justice, power word, power word, power word.
Welcome to a very special rebroadcast of the Social Justice Power Hour. This conversation we had with Ms. Rosie Perez and Jonathan Eig, the author of Ali, A Life, the definitive book on Muhammad Ali, in celebration and recognition of the import of the fight of the century, which happened 50 years ago this very evening. I want to especially thank Jonathan. Jonathan's come back tonight to share with us his thoughts for just a hot minute on why this fight was so important, both in the ring and outside the ring, in boxing, in culture, and social justice. Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing your time with us tonight.
Oh, it's always good to see you. And I love talking about this fight. I mean, it's the fight of the century because it's the only time two undefeated heavyweight champions have met in the ring. But if you look at that poster, I can tell you another reason why this is an important fight. They're still calling him Cassius Clay. After 7 years, he changed his name in 1964. 1971, they're still calling him Cassius Clay. And that's just an overt act of racism. That's saying, we don't want to accept your name. We get to call you what we want to call you. We'll keep calling you by your slave name if we want to. And Ali's got to swallow that. But in this fight, he comes back after being the most hated man in America for refusing to fight in Vietnam. The times have changed now. We're past the 60s. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King have both been assassinated, and Ali is fighting for something new now. He's fighting for a comeback. He's fighting for his reputation. He's fighting for a chance to be an American hero on his own terms after having been the most unpopular man in America, at least among white Americans. Among black Americans, he was a source of pride, even when he was being picked on by the government.
So you see here him on the canvas. Tell us about this. Tell us why this moment is so important.
I think this might be the most important moment in Ali's career. This is in the 15th round. He's knocked down by Frazier. He gets up and finishes this brutal fight. This was a massacre. They both men were hospitalized after this fight in terrible shape. Took weeks for them to recover. But Ali gets right back up after this knockdown. And I believe that's the moment that Americans begin to reconsider him. They say, this is a man who stood up to the government, got back up and finished the fight. He gets knocked down by Joe Frazier. He gets back up and finishes the fight. He loses this fight, and his first loss, and then he's got to start working to get another shot at the heavyweight championship. And I think that's when Americans really begin to appreciate how tough this guy is.
So fight of the century, not important for a win because it wasn't a win. It was a loss in the ring, but outside the ring, he won back his humanity.
That's right. He won respect from people who had denied him respect, refused to call him by his real name. He said, I'm doing this my way. I'm going to fight on my terms. And if you don't like it, tough.
Jonathan, thank you so much for allowing us this very important context to why the fight of the century 50 years ago was so important to Muhammad Ali and to culture and to social justice. Always a pleasure to have you here, my friend. And now let us both enjoy the conversation we had with Ms. Rosie Perez on the celebration of Ali's birthday back a few weeks back. Thank you, my friend. Be well. Best to your family.
Take care.
We're here to talk about this book and this man. Jonathan Eig is the author of Ali, A Life, and Rosie Perez is a lifelong boxing fan. And that's how we hooked her into the Social Justice Power Hour. So without further ado, thank you for putting up with me and my shenanigans and my fuzzy face. But now let's bring on the true beauties of the show, Ms. Rosie Perez and Mr. Jonathan Eig, everybody. Welcome them to our virtual stage. Hey, folks, how you doing?
Hi, everybody.
So good to see you again.
Wonderful to have you both with us. Thank you so much. I am a fan of both of yours in such a big, big way. Jonathan, we've had the honor and pleasure of having you on the show before. We talked about Muhammad Ali. We talked about what a strong social justice advocate and activist he was. We also talked about the difficulties he faced in his life and his philandering and the difficult things that he did to other people. So warts and all, we always want to make sure that we speak the truth about our heroes, because that's what makes them heroes. They were humans as well. And Rosie, you, my love, have been someone who has been an activist since back in the day, from Fight the Power to the flight attendant. Your career has always been about bringing new voices and new experiences to our screens. We thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm so impressed with your future guests. I can't wait. I'm going to start logging on. This is amazing.
Don't leave. So now we're just three kids from Brooklyn shooting the shit. So let's get down to it. I think that let's just start off. Rosie, I am sure you are a huge fight fan. So both Jonathan and I were talking before in the green room, as it were. How did your fight fandom start? How did your interest in boxing, what's the secret origin of that?
Well, I kind of had no choice. Being a Puerto Rican American, it's part of the culture. We like baseball and we like boxing. And so it was just always on. And I wasn't raised by my mother, but I had court-appointed visits to her home. And, it seemed every time I went there was boxing on. And so I wanted to connect with her, in a way. And when I was very, very little, I saw this one fight, knew about the fight because there was a big lead up to the fight. And it was Willie Benitez Jr. versus Sugar Ray Leonard. And I had a secret crush on Sugar Ray, but I didn't tell anybody because everybody was rooting, of course, for the Puerto Rican. And so that fight got me hooked because with boxing, what makes a boxer exciting is their story, is their backstory. That's how you get hooked in. It's not just their skill or lack of skill or antics in the ring or out of the ring. It's really their backstory. And that's why you root for them or you boo them. And I just got hooked. I got hooked on both fighters and I was very young. And when Willie Benitez lost and everybody thought he was going to win, it was the first time I cried watching a fight. And I remember one of my relatives laughed and just hit me on the back. And I looked around the room and everybody else was crying too. And I was hooked. Now, truth be told, I was kind of crying, not only because Willie lost, but I felt guilty that I was happy that Sugar Ray won. So yeah, that's how I got hooked. And then I just started following fighters. And when I was growing up, they had ABC Wide World of Sports, and they used to show boxing all the time, and it was free. It wasn't until later when they had Closed Circuit and that, and then HBO, and we were too poor to have HBO. We would make friends with people who had HBO to watch a fight, But by then I was hooked, and so. That's how I got it.
Jonathan, same for you. What hooked you into? Was it Muhammad Ali especially, or was it boxing in general, and then Muhammad Ali as a focus for you?
I think for me, Ali came first, and I think Ali came first for a lot of people of our generation because his story. Rosie talked about the backstory. He had the greatest backstory of them all, right? And in the 70s, you knew. I was too young to remember what went on in the 60s, but you knew that there was this big uprising, and you knew that Ali was a central figure in that uprising, and you knew that he was this rebel. You knew that he was about black power, and that he'd stood up to the government, and that he refused to fight in Vietnam. And yet there was something so lovable and charming about this guy that he was irresistible, and you had to have a strong opinion about him. People either loved him or hated him. So by the time I was old enough to pay attention to these fights, the first Frazier fight in 71, and then, of course, the Rumble in the Jungle in 74, everybody had an opinion. And they were, both black guys, so it wasn't racial. It was really interesting to see how people chose their sides. Did you like Foreman, who was seen as this kind of a sullen guy, but he was all American? Or did you like Ali, who was the rebel, but he was also a clown? It was fascinating. I think even the kids picked up on the fact that there was something really deep going on there.
Yeah. Jonathan, you said that it wasn't racial. For people of color, it was.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Because the way Ali just disrespected Joe Frazier, and even in the Latin culture, there's a lot of racism and self-hatred in regards to, light skin, dark skin, all of that nonsense that just, further puts a wedge between us. And so that it was actually really, really painful to watch that because, of course, I think the Benitez fight was in 1977. Of course, everybody loved Ali, like you said, and I just thought he was fascinating. And I didn't understand at that time the politics that was going on. But when he just went in on him, even when he went in, later I watched, Sonny Liston and stuff. It just hurt. You know what I mean? And I remember that was a topic of discussion, where, people were like, why did he say that? Why did he say that? And yet, even still, we still loved him. It was very, very weird. It was very crazy, but it was a racial issue for people of color.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I was too young to understand what was going on. But now looking back on it, you see how interesting it was that Ali was really using a lot of the same racist tropes that people used in the South to attack black people. He was using them against Joe Frazier, calling him an Uncle Tom. And, it's one of the really interesting aspects of Ali. Was he doing that just to try to get into Joe's head? I mean, do you think that he was doing that just as a fighter to try to psych out his opponent, or did he have this real mean streak about him?
No, he was doing that just to make sure people bought tickets to the fight. Period. Yeah, that's called promotion. Right. Even even later on when they were screaming Ali Boombaye, which means Ali kill him. And he was like, yeah, let's go. It's fighters do the craziest things to sell tickets, and some fighters mean it and some fighters don't. I think there's very few fighters that do mean what they say. Maybe Mike Tyson, but really it's for Ali, it was to sell tickets. It was to hype the fight.
Yeah, I think
but I heard the catch in your voice when you were talking about how he talked about Frazier. I mean, that really was difficult for you and for the community.
It was very, very difficult, especially for me because in my family, I'm a love child. That's probably why I'm so passionate. My father was, God rest his soul, dark skinned, and my mother was as white as Jonathan. They're both Puerto Rican. But so when I would go to my mother's house, I'm the darkest one in the room. And they made sure that I knew it, and then when I would go home to my aunt's house or go to my father's house in Puerto Rico, I was able to breathe a little bit easier. So for me to hear all of that, I remember just sitting there and just got like really quiet. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to do this a lot. Like if I didn't feel well, my head was just cocked all the way back. And I really wanted to cry, but I just like held it inside. And then when we went to school, you had people of color and you had, white people repeating those words. And, it did hurt. It hurt a lot, just brings up all that stuff, all that stuff about colonization and, making you feel less than just because the color of your skin. It's all bullshit, it's all absurd. Chester Himes wrote that in one of his books, is racism is absurd. And anyone who deals in racism deals in absurdity, and because it's not real. And, but it feels real. The attacks do feel real.
So, but you both also say, and Rosie, I have to say, I just want to say it's now, in our first 20 minutes, we're not even a third of the way through, but gosh, there's so much I want to follow up on that with you personally, but I don't want to take away from our conversation on boxing. So I'm going to have to invite you back sometime to pull on that thread. But let's talk about Ali, because you both said the same thing just now, that he had this tremendous, whether it was a put on for showmanship or whether it was for reals in his heart. And we all three agree that it was showmanship, but it was still a really difficult aspect of his character. And it's not something he did once. It wasn't a solitary occurrence. It happened often, where he would berate opponents in that way that was very much beyond the pale of what's acceptable. But you both forgive him too. So what was within him that allowed him to do these very transgressive things?
It's a
You
tough
want
one.
to take it, Jonathan?
I'll take a shot at it. The thing about Ali that I think really allowed people to forgive him, Joe Frazier never forgave him, though, and I don't think Sonny Liston ever forgave him, but he was always himself. He was always being honest. And if he was trying to get in your head, if he was trying to cut you down, he was being himself. He started doing that when he was like 15. He'd go to these amateur fights, these Golden Glove competitions, and there'd be 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, Army veterans in the same competitions fighting against 15-year-old Ali. And Ali would walk right up to them and say, I'm gonna destroy you. You're a fat old man. And he would just try desperately. I think he had a little bit of inferiority within him, which seems absurd for a guy who's always going around calling himself the greatest. But maybe if you're going around calling yourself the greatest all the time, it's because you're not sure. And Ali was beaten by his dad. His dad was an alcoholic. So I think there's a lot going on there. And one of Ali's friends told me that the reason he picked on Joe Frazier is because Joe Frazier was a more authentic black man in many ways. He came from real poverty, and Ali felt a little insecure around him. And maybe that's why he lashed out the way he did.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you, Rosie, how do you marry those two things? Because the story you told us was pretty painful, but yet you sit here and you with a smile think of Ali. So how does that come about for you?
Because there's a great chapter in Jonathan's book about Ali, about just stating that he's human and that he has flaws, and he wore his greatness on his sleeve, and he also wore his flaws on his sleeve, and he was unapologetic about both, and that's mesmerizing. Even when he later in his years said that he felt bad, and he apologized about what he had said, you believed him. And I have to say this, though, with all of Ali's insecurities, and I do agree with you, Jonathan, that they were there, especially, when you get beat as a child, when you endure child abuse, that's where his mean streak came in. That's where he, even though he was not poverty stricken, let's say, as you said it, as Liston or Frazier, abuse, doesn't have any price tag on it. And so, he was, so that his main streak was real and authentic, but so was his belief in himself. And he is one of the greatest fighters with the greatest amount of belief ever. And for you to step into a ring to get punched in the face or punch somebody else in the face, you got to believe you are the greatest of all time. You have to, or else you're going to lose, and that's why I loved him as a kid. A love child, abject poverty. But yet I knew, because my aunt told me and my father told me, that I was special. And everybody wanted me to act accordingly. And I had a strong spirit inside of me, and I just didn't want to. And then for me, Muhammad Ali gave me that license to be, so audacious, just to be like, no, I don't want to do that. No, this is who I am. No, I don't care about what the status quo is. I don't care, and it was, yes, I can do this. So what if you're white? That doesn't make you better than me. That comes from Ali. And most people don't really realize that, the civil rights movement with the Black Power and stuff like that. Ali was probably one of the first commercial figures to say those things on a worldwide platform. And as a person of color, you're like, yeah, you know what? Step back. This is who I am. I am not who you want me to be. He literally said that, Jonathan. I forgot the quote. You have it in your book. You know, I'm not this. I'm not that. This is who I am. Get used to it. And that's powerful.
I call that
powerful.
I call that the Black Declaration of Independence. Because Ali said, I don't have to be who you want me to be. I don't have to believe in the God you tell me to believe in. I don't have to say what you want me to say. I'm free to be who I want to be. And that was a Declaration of Independence. I think that resonated for so many people who've been oppressed, for so many people who felt like they didn't have a voice. I think that was in some ways his greatest moment. That's when he announced that he was a Muslim. He announced he was changing his name. And soon after that, he announced he wouldn't fight in Vietnam. Those were bombs he was dropping. You know, that was big.
He was magic, wasn't he? I mean, he was magic. That's the only way to really explain it. Whether you look at that clip, and I don't know if it's the Dick Cavett show, where he's in suit and tie, but he walks out and he does the shuffle. And I swear to freaking God, the man is off the ground. He's floating on air. That's magic. But also the fact that he could say these things and be accepted by both black and white and all folks in between. How did he do it? How did he, as Rosie said, he was one of the most prominent figures who was able to say these things and, for lack of a term, get away with it.
Because he was nice and he was lovable. Even though he did have that mean streak, you know, when he was in the ring, he was nice and he was lovable. You know, you take somebody like Floyd Mayweather Jr., you know, he's very boisterous. He's very flamboyant. He says crazy things, you know, and, you know, people love him in regards to his talent as a boxer, but as a man, it comes into question, you know. But with Muhammad Ali, you know, even when I met him, you just felt this positivity, and you felt this sense of he just wanted to be in the room. He just wanted everyone to have fun. He just wanted everyone to give him a hug and just acknowledge who he was. And you know, that's extraordinary. And that's why so many people of color forgave him for his adulterous ways, forgave him for him flip-flopping on his politics, forgave him for not saying anything about the Iraq war or what have you. You know, they just kept forgiving him because he gave us that license. You know, he gave us that license, and he was just a nice guy. He was a nice man.
I think you're so right. I think that's such a big part of it. There's this great clip. One of my favorite clips of Ali is when he met Martin Luther King, and you know, they disagreed and they called each other out in public a lot. You know, King said that Ali should stick to boxing because he didn't know what he was talking about, because Ali was opposed to integration. Ali thought that there was no point in ever expecting the white man to really treat the black man fairly and equally. But then you see them together, and King is cracking up. Ali's just making him laugh, and Ali keeps interrupting. Who interrupts Martin Luther King, right? Only Muhammad Ali. And King is just loving it. And you see that by the end of it, they agree on more than they could possibly disagree on. And that's the magic that you're talking about.
Yeah. So for those of you just joining us, I want to just pop the book up right here. This is Jonathan's book. You can see it on Rosie's shelf right there. And here's the Rosie, and I hope that I'm not telling tales out of school. Here's the secret origin of this Power Hour. Both Jonathan and I spotted his book on Rosie's shelf, and we immediately started to co-conspire and said, let's reach out to Rosie, let's get her on the Power Hour, let's have this conversation. We willed it into being. And Rosie, I hope you don't mind, I want to give a shout out because I believe in raising names. Tariq was really so helpful in facilitating everything, so I want to give my kudos and respect to Tariq for helping this to happen. And speaking of helping to happen, we have a dedicated volunteer in our comment section. Chris is out there, as he is every night, and he's giving you links to Rosie's social media to get in touch and to follow her, and to Jonathan's stuff, and also to buy the book. Please support our authors and the folks who come out to the show. Ali Life is a beautiful book. Rosie and I both have it on our shelves. You can't see mine. It's right out of shot. It's a
I read it twice.
There you go. You took someone else's turn.
You made my day.
It's at bookshop.org on our list. And when you buy it at bookshop.org, it's wonderful because it supports independent bookstores. Gives back. That's why we appreciate using that site rather than one of the big mega sites. So that's Jonathan's book. That's what we're talking about today, and that's how we hooked Rosie into the show. So I hope she's not regretting it thus far.
No.
So I purported that Ali was magic, and we've talked about him out of the ring, but you both love the fights too. How good a fighter was he?
He was a great fighter. He was a great fighter because he fought mostly on instinct and conditioning. He was especially in his early years before he had to give everything up because of him being a draft dodger, but he was in supreme condition and didn't take any of that for granted. Even just with my work, when I go to work, I come prepared, and if you're not prepared, oh well, because I'm going to do my job. You know what I mean? And he was the same, and he was so focused, but it was that he fought on instinct, and he had that jab. His jab was everything. He made the jab. The jab is always important. It's one of the fundamental strikes in boxing. And, because it keeps your opponent away. It fakes your opponent out. It hurts your opponent if you have power behind it. And that was the last thing that he had, that he kept trying to rely on. Even in his later days, he kept trying to stick to that jab and stuff. But he was just good. He was good. And, when the dancing and everything, he was so agile too. I mean, gosh, me as a dancer and an ex-choreographer, man, it was just a thing of beauty to see him float like that. When he didn't have that, he kept, he created the rope-a-dope. He kept trying new things to always win. And that's pretty awesome. That's what made him great. That's really what made him great. Can I give a shout out to somebody?
Of course.
I see on the chats, and he's a friend of mine. Andres Ferrari of ESPN has joined this, and I cannot believe this. This is amazing.
I'm thrilled.
Happy New Year.
That's fantastic. Yeah, please. Andres, thanks so much for being with us. We're thrilled about that. We're thrilled to have new people join us, and I hope you'll come back, my friend.
I agree with everything you said. I mean, people criticized him when he started because his boxing technique was unorthodox. He kept his hands down and he moved back to avoid punches instead of ducking them. But he had such speed, such reflexes that he was able to compensate for that. And the jab was everything. The jab, as you said, Rosie, kept the opponents away, and it hurt and it wore you down. And then you can just see it in the Liston fight. By the end of the first round, the combinations start coming because the jab has done its job. But you're so right. I have to ask you though, Rosie, in the dance scene that you did for Do the Right Thing, it looks like you know what you're doing with those punches. Those look like they would hurt. Did you do some boxing?
Oh my gosh, I think that the opening scene is horrible. It's horrible dancing, and it's so funny how it's become so huge, especially now during COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement, and everything like that. But that was after 8 hours of dancing and only one break. So by the time my arms were like noodles, my legs were noodles. And so when I was throwing those punches, when I look back at it, they're just so sloppy and just horrible. But Spike said that's what he wanted out of me. And I always say it's become a famous line. I go, you could have told me. We could have saved a lot of time and I would have delivered that performance, but but thank you. That's the only thing that I see but I still love the opening scene. Don't get me wrong. And speaking about Do the Right Thing, which is crazy because of the whole Black Lives Matter protest and all of this racial strife that has come to the surface once again in America. I was in a supermarket. And, I'm wearing the mask and I love the mask. I could go anywhere, but I can't open my mouth because then people figure it out. It's me. And I'm in the line and, and I'm talking to the cashier and this woman goes, honey, and she's talking to her son. He's about like maybe 10 or 11, I don't know, 12 or whatever. And he goes, that's the lady. That's the lady. We watched a movie last night. And I went, excuse me? And I'm like, you let this boy, there's nudity in this. And then she said, I wanted him to see that things have not changed. And I wanted him to see that this is not anything new and that we have to stand up for our rights, because they've been killing us Black people for a very, very long time. And I looked at her and I said, I wish I could hug you. We can't because of COVID. So we did the elbow COVID hug. But that was really a powerful moment for me. That's I don't know how long Do the Right Thing was, maybe 30 years later. It has its resurgence. So
it's also that great anthem, Fight the Power. You have Public Enemy, and first of all, let me just say this, not to take away from the moment, but your punches were absolutely perfect. I mean, having done just a little smidgen of boxing myself, at least learn how to punch, and you want to get that, you want to twist the wrist, and it is really powerful.
Let's see that jab, Rose. Let's see the jab.
But the other part of it is, you're right, that dance sequence, it's not only about the punches and not only about the choreography, which are both spot on. There's an anger and a passion that you see in your face and in your movement that really makes that what it is and why it's necessary and why it's so iconic to so many of us.
Thank you. That was all Spike. That was all Spike. I
Spike
did
was out there dancing. You were out there dancing. Spike is amazing. All kudos. But that was you, and that was your power.
Yes, but the original song was supposed to be Cool Jerk.
Really?
Yes. And then literally at the last minute, and there was a wonderful choreographer, Otis Salid, and I worked really hard on that choreography. And then at the last minute, Spike came to see it. He goes, it's not right. And he called up Chuck D and he said, I need a song. And I don't know, I think we only had like 2 days. Chuck D came up with a song like that. And, and Spike was like, I want punching, I want anger, just want you to go for it. Just, this is what I want. And it's like, all right. And he goes, and I want that hip hop stuff. Originally it wasn't a hip hop dancing. And so, it was a brilliant change of direction. It was just really, I give Spike a lot of credit.
All right, I'm going to get in trouble if I get off topic here. So I really would love, Rosie, you got to promise me you're going to come back so we can talk more about this. But let's talk about, did either one of you get to meet Ali?
I think we both did.
Yeah.
You want to go first, Rosie? Tell your story about meeting him?
I'll be quick about it, but it's very embarrassing. I was at a party, a celebrity party, and that I was invited to with my girlfriend, and the person giving the party, his wife came over to me and asked to have me thrown out because the New York Post or the Daily News and page 6, New York Post said that certain celebrity was having an affair with a Latin dancer and assumed it was me, and it wasn't me. And I got so angry, and there was this one other celebrity got in my face, and Brooklyn came out, and I was ready to demolish her. And I am cursing up a storm. There's security guards around who even stepped back. And I remember I said, if you don't get the F out of my face, I'm going to punch the F out of you, you fat B. And I have a claw on my hand, and I think it's security. And I turn, I was, get the F, oh my God. And it was Muhammad Ali. And I started crying. I said, no, it wasn't supposed to happen this way. No, I wasn't supposed to meet you like this. Oh, I dreamt about this moment. No, not now. And I remember he just went like this. And I instantly calmed down. And then he went and he hugged me. And it was like I was a little girl. And I buried my face in his chest and I just cried. And Lonnie was with him, and Lonnie was like, it's all right. It's all right. You're not going anywhere. You're not going. You coming to our section. And I said, no, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home. I don't want to stay. She goes, no, you come. And then he said, you come. And then he whispered something in my ear that I will never tell anybody. And I burst out laughing, and Lonnie rolled her eyes. And, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't get over the moment. I sat with them maybe 5 minutes, and I got up and I went home. And I remember Penny Marshall was there, and I remember she said to me, Rosie, get over yourself. The champ wants you to sit with him. And I left. And then years later, I saw Lonnie, and I said, do you remember me? And she goes, really? Really? And I said, yeah. She goes, are you okay? And I said, I'm fine. I was so embarrassed. He goes, Ali loved it. He loved it. He loved your fire. And so then I felt better about it. So.
And Jonathan?
I'm throwing in the towel. I can't top that.
You can't.
That's not fair. That is not fair. All right. Well, I spent 3 years trying to meet Ali because I wanted to interview him for the book, but he was pretty sick by then. And I went several times to fundraisers that he was appearing at. And I got into a fight with this dancer this one time. No, I'm just kidding. I met Lonnie several times at these parties, and she said, finally, just come to the house and we'll try to let you meet Ali. And she told me to bring my daughter. I brought my 5-year-old daughter. We went to Ali's house in Phoenix. We spent 3 hours there, and Ali was too sick. He didn't come out of his room. So I didn't get to meet him until then 6 months later, he was feeling better. And Lonnie invited me to this fundraiser they were doing. And I went with Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes and I had a few drinks. And Larry took me into the VIP party where I wasn't supposed to be. And Ali was there. And Lonnie introduced me to him. And he couldn't talk anymore at that point. This was just like 6 months before he passed away. But I was able to tell him that I was working on this book and that I was trying my hardest to do his story justice. And I couldn't tell if he even heard what I said. I just whispered in his ear and told him I loved him. And I was just so glad I got to meet him. And Lonnie took a picture of me, and I will never show anyone the picture because I look like such an idiot, like such a little boy, like meeting his idol. And it's just the most embarrassing photo ever taken. No one but my wife will ever see that photo. There's a part in your book that brought me to tears that I wanted to tell you, Jonathan. And it was the part in the book where you wrote the scene where Ali goes to visit Bundini, and it was his last days, and he was dying, and the kindness that he shared and the love those two had, and they had such a topsy-turvy relationship that I never knew about until I read your book, actually. And I literally cried. It was just like, that's what makes Ali so extraordinary, That scene tells you so much about Ali because, Bundini is the man who spent 20 years toweling off Ali in the corner between rounds of this fight. And when Bundini was an alcoholic and he was, cheap hotel room that Ali was paying for and he was dying, Ali went there and he toweled off Bundini. And he said, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, rumble, young man, rumble. And they did the roar together, one last time. And oh man, that was Ali. And, he was there for people. Sometimes to a fault, he just gave of himself so generously.
Yeah, a lot of people took advantage of Ali. A lot of people think that it, I've heard people say, the Nation of Islam took advantage of him. I said, there were hordes of people. You detail that so beautifully in your book too. You know what I mean? To the point where you have to take a break because it's infuriating. And it wasn't until, as you wrote in the later chapters, when Lonnie came around and basically tossed everybody out and took control, to his benefit, so, that's what I was meaning about Ali. His heart was so huge, and it just, it bankrupted him. It put him in debt, literally, because he was just too kind.
Yeah, that's absolutely
Can
right.
you tell us a little bit about that? Tell us, he came from very difficult circumstances himself. So was it him trying to make the world better for all those folks that came after him?
I think Ali just always believed that the world would work out fine. Like whatever he did, it would be fine, and there would always be more money. Why worry about money? My grandma was like that. Just spend it. It's there. We'll find some more tomorrow when we need it. Somehow it'll be okay. And that was Ali. He just always figured things were going to work out okay. And sometimes that was, some would say foolish because he wasn't planning, he wasn't saving. He employed all of these people and never occurred to him that, he could deduct the expenses on his taxes or that he should buy medical insurance for them. He paid everything out of pocket, but it was all out of love. Like Rosie said, it was all because his heart was just so big that he thought there was nothing that couldn't get done with you if you had that generosity. And that's a beautiful way to live if you can, and not too many people can get away with it.
No.
He did.
And you also wrote beautifully in your book about the lighting of the Olympic torch. I don't know if you remember that. I remember that.
I
mean, just tears flowing, everybody in the house watching the Olympics with Ali standing there with the torch. And then you wrote so beautifully of how the audience just went silent, like, thinking he wasn't going to be able to light the torch and stuff. And, it was a beautiful moment of him coming full circle with America. They did such damage to him, because he was standing up for what he thought was right. Some people criticize, no, he wasn't. He just didn't want to go to war. Yeah, right. He did. That was the point. And, most people would have given in, and you state in your book that they offered him, look, you won't have to fight. You'll just enlist and you'll just do boxing exhibitions. How many actors did that? How many actors enlisted? Maybe what was I forgot his name. But anyway, Room with the View or anyway, not Room. Jimmy Stewart. He actually was in a fighter, plane and everything. But most people in the entertainment industry didn't really fight. Very few people did. And he said, I don't want the easy way out. I don't want it. I'll face the consequences, and then for them to allow him to do that, to hold the torch and light the torch in the Olympics, it was just a stunning moment. It really was. It was, I felt like America was saying, let's have peace. And that's all Ali wanted. That's all he wanted.
Yeah.
Peace.
I agree with you so strongly. And I think it's in some way it's a shame though that we only loved him when he was down, when he was weak, when he couldn't talk anymore. We should have loved him when he was ferocious. We shouldn't have turned our backs on him. People forget that, before the Olympic torch, Ali was struggling a little bit. He was forgotten because he wasn't as beautiful and he wasn't as loquacious because Parkinson's had really limited his speech. He didn't have enough to do. He was bored at times. And then when he lit that torch, America rediscovered him and they embraced him again. But I just always caution people, let's not love Ali, the teddy bear. Let's remember Ali, the grizzly bear, because that's who we really should be celebrating. He wasn't a draft dodger. He was a war resistor. He was a pacifist. And, in the spirit of Bayard Rustin, who we are blessed to be honoring with this Power Hour, let's remember that he sacrificed. He was willing to risk everything. He didn't know he was going to be banned from boxing for 3 years. He thought he was giving up his whole career for his beliefs, for his religious and political beliefs.
Yeah. Well, the boxing world always loved Ali and always will forever love Ali. Even when everybody turned against him, nobody ever in the boxing world took away his greatness.
So I just people are really enjoying the conversation. I just want to highlight a couple. Michael says this is a magical conversation. And Ron says, I share Rosie's sentiment. Jonathan's book is so well written. It informs, entertains, and moves. This is such a great discussion. Two wonderful guests. Thank you both and everybody watching. Of course, it'd be nice to mention the host too, but that's fine. So, okay, let's get back to boxing a little bit so Andres doesn't get mad at me and watching too. So, do you both have a favorite fight of Ali's? Is there one fight that you feel was his absolute perfect moment in the ring?
I would say Sonny Liston fight for me, because that's the one that put him on the map. And that was the one where him screaming and running around in the ring. Every time I watch it back, everyone's like, see, he did it, he did it. For me, I felt like there was a moment like he couldn't believe he did it. You know what I mean? And it's like if somebody was to win an Oscar and didn't believe that they were going to win it and just go, oh my gosh, you know, and then just was like, I'm a bad man. I did it. I told you I was the greatest of all time. I told you. And it was just like standing up and cheering and saying, yes, yes, you know, and and that put him on the map. That's where he was standing up for himself. And that's where he won. He beat the old establishment, and he was telling America, this is who I am. I'm loud and I'm proud, and I'm black and I'm proud. And I don't care what you think. And so for me, that's my favorite moment.
That's a really good answer. And that's the fight I opened my book with. So obviously I'm partial to it. But since you took that one, I'll take I'll be controversial here, and I'll pick the fight that Ali lost. I think the first Frazier fight is in many ways my favorite. First of all, it's just a horrible, brutal, incredible fight with two fighters who have such different styles. And Joe Frazier is not the greatest heavyweight of all time, but he's almost built just to fight Ali. His style is perfectly matched to give Ali a hard time. And I maintain that that 15th round, when Frazier throws this ferocious hook and knocks Ali on his ass, and Ali gets right back up, I believe that's the moment that America falls in love with Muhammad Ali, because he's been out 3.5 years. He's not, as Howard Cosell would say, he's not the man he used to be. Yeah. But he gets back up. He's been knocked down by the government. He's had his title stripped away from him. He gets back up instantly, finishes the fight, loses in a decision, and then gets to work to try to get another shot at the championship. And I think America starts to love Ali because he's human at that point, because they've seen him get knocked down and get back up. And that's something that, whether you're, even the racists in America, even the people who thought he was a traitor to his country for refusing to fight in Vietnam, everybody had to admire him in that moment.
So, something we touched upon at the very outset of the program was the difference of perception between white folks and people of color, and how they saw Ali's antics when we were talking about how he, was so horrible to some of his opponents, with these racial epithets. And do you think, and this is a very different answer, and this is one that you don't have to worry about having the same answer, as his biographer and as someone who comes from one of those communities, Rosie, how did the white community see Ali as opposed to people of color? Where was the difference in what they saw in him, and where was the Venn diagram of where they met up? Jonathan, you go first this time.
I can go first on that one. That's such a tough question. I think, Ali was really difficult to pigeonhole. Like I said, he's the 1 minute he's joining the Nation of Islam, he's declaring his loyalty to Elijah Muhammad, and then the next minute he's on the Jerry Lewis show, cracking jokes, or being accompanied by Liberace as he reads one of his poems. How do you figure out how to deal with a guy like that? But I think the most important thing, white people wrestled with that, and that's good that they had to wrestle with it, because it made them think. But for black people to see that kind of pride, I think, as Rosie talked about earlier, for people of color to see somebody at a time when, black people were still being denied the vote legally in some places, and, even more so than today, for somebody to be able to stand up there and call themselves the greatest and get in the face of America, to get in the face of white power and raise his hand and raise his fist and say, no, we don't have to take it anymore. I think that was hugely important for all of American culture.
I think there's a lot of white people that still don't like Ali. I was on a plane once. I was going to Vegas to a fight. It was Mayweather versus Canelo, and I'm in first class, and there's I think he was a Marine, and he asked me where I was going. I said I was going to the fights, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I love the fights and this and that. I'm such a big fan of yours and stuff like that." And I said, "Oh, thanks so much." He goes, "But you know what? I've heard you talk about Muhammad Ali, and it really upsets me because he was a draft dodger." And I said, "He was a black man standing up for his rights." And he went, "Okay." And he didn't speak to me for the rest of the flight. And then when we were getting off the plane, and I said, "Well, take care and thanks for fighting for us." And he goes, "You're kidding, right? That's what you believe in?" And I said, "Yeah, I am. Thank you for your service." And I said, "But you also, this is America, right? We could be different." That was the whole purpose of this nation forming. We're supposed to have different beliefs and different views and different ways, and we're supposed to respect one another. And he said, "All right, fair enough." And we hugged it out. He said, "I still don't like Ali." I said, "Okay, cool."
So how would Ali be received today? Do you think that it would be the same, or do you think that even he couldn't supersede all the difficulties that we see today? I mean, we have someone who was thrown out of the NFL for taking a knee, and you think about that in comparison to all of Ali's strong stances, strong words, strong demeanor, strong nature, strong personality. Would he have been able to do what he did then now?
I think he would have still stood up. I think it would have been, it would depend upon, I don't know if you agree with me, Jonathan, what stage of his life he was at. Depends upon, if he was young Ali, if he was returning from being exiled Ali, or was he the Ali after taking way too many fights and should have quit, and was more, thoughtful about things. So I don't know.
I think sadly, if you look at what happened to Colin Kaepernick, it would suggest that Ali would not have been treated any differently today. If Ali took that same stand, if the Sonny Liston fight was, 2018, 2020, and he announced after the fight that he was joining the Nation of Islam, that he didn't believe in Christianity anymore, that he was a Muslim, and that he wasn't going to fight for America, he would have been banned from boxing again. I think the same thing would have happened. And I just think that he would have still stood up for himself, and he would have fought just as hard. And, it's just sad that the same kind of treatment is happening today, that Colin Kaepernick was kicked out of the NFL and couldn't get a job. And, you see this lip service from the league now. You see, the painting signs in the end zones and putting little stickers on the helmets. Give me a break. Stand up for what you believe in, and don't punish players for standing up for what they believe in.
Exactly. Yeah, and I agree with you. And what I meant was also is that how he would stand up. If he was the younger Ali, he would be mad as hell. He would be mad as hell. And I think if he was the older Ali, he would be just as angry. But I think that how he would articulate that would be differently, but I don't think he would have backed down. I really don't think he would have backed down. And speaking of Kaepernick, I mean, I can't, let's not even go there. Just get infuriated. It's just, just horrible.
We have someone in the comments section, and one of you may know her. She says, "Rosie, thank you for sharing your praise for my husband's book. He puts his heart and soul into his subjects, and he deserves every bit of praise. Proud of you, Jonathan."
That's my wife. Thank you, Jen.
That's a beautiful thing. Love.
He's the greatest.
There you go. You're the greatest. See, that's so beautiful. So speaking of, let's end on this note. Can you share with us one or two of your favorite quotes of Ali's? He was so incredibly wonderful. Some say that he was the one of the first rappers, and he brought that hip hop feeling to so many things. There's a great book also called Ali Rap, which brings together all of his quotes. Do you have a couple of favorite quotes, each of you?
I already stated it. The one, I don't know how to say it verbatim, but about him saying, "This is who I am. Get used to it. I'm not this, I'm not that, this is who I am." And Jonathan, you probably know how you could recite it. That's my favorite quote of his.
Yeah, I love that one too. And I also love that he said, service to others is the price we pay for our rent here on earth. But my favorite, I think, is he was at Harvard once, and some student raised his hand and said, can you make up a poem for us? And off the top of his head, he just said, "Me, we." And some people look at that and they say, well, it's about me and we, W-E. But I think what Ali was saying is that it's just so much fun to be me.
That's right. That's how I took
it. Because it was just so much fun to be Ali, and it's so much fun to bask in his shadow and to share his story.
Well, thank you both so much. I want to again show the book to our viewing audience. Those of you that don't have a copy of this book, it's Ali a Life. Chris has shown you a link to purchase it on bookshop.org at our dedicated Power Hour author list. There's a bunch of great books there. Buy a copy for yourself. Buy a copy for a friend. Buy a copy for an enemy who'll become a friend. Buy a copy for your local school district. This is a great book for a high school to have on their shelves. And also, this is really imperative. This is something important, folks. Call your local library and make sure they have a copy of this book on their shelves. Because as much as we want everyone to buy the book, there's some people who don't have the financial means to do that. And going to their local library is how they get exposed to ideas, to heroes, to things that they might not be exposed to otherwise. So please call your local library, make sure they have a copy on their shelves, and if they don't, you just request as a patron, please get a copy, because I think it would be good for our community. And speaking of being good for our community, I want to thank you both again. Can you just, before you shoot out, I know we're in the after party already, Prince will be proud. Can you tell us what's coming up next for both of you? Because I know that our view audience would love to follow you wherever you're going. Rosie, we just watched The Flight Attendant. It was wonderful. Thank you for that. So do you have something coming up next that we can see?
I'm on a adult animation on Netflix as a spin-off of Big Mouth. It's really crude, but it's fun. We're going into the second season of The Flight Attendant as well. And I directed a short film for Sting and Trudy Styler. They're doing a collection of shorts of time at COVID when the shutdown first occurred, and that was really difficult to direct. The task was we had to write, direct, and produce it ourselves, and then turn it into them. And so I think that's coming out later this year, and we're in good company. And I saw Griffin Dunn. He was asked. His is amazing. His is really, really good.
Oh, I love Griffin Dunn. After Hours is one of my favorite films. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And everybody follow Rosie on all the social media so you can find out when all those things are happening. Jonathan, we did have a question a couple of times about the Ken Burns documentary. Do you have any more information on that? Can you share anything about that?
Yeah, the Ken Burns documentary, which I've been fortunate to help out on, will be out in the fall of 21. So only in about, I think it'll be September. It'll be a 4-part, 8-hour documentary, and you'll see my face pop up on there a couple times, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm working on a new book as well about Martin Luther King. And on January 20th, I'll be inaugurated as the president of the Rosie Perez fan club.
Thank you both so much. This was over the moon for us, and we love both of you. One of you is much hotter than the other one. Sorry, Rosie. Jonathan, I can't stop staring at your eyes. You both are beautiful people, and we so appreciate you being with us. Our community is very thankful for the work that you both do and for sharing this Power Hour with us. Please be well and best to both your families.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. This was great. And support the Bayard Rustin Social Justice Center.
Yay.
Thank you, my friends. See you soon.
Bye.
So I hope everyone enjoyed that conversation. What wonderful folks. Thank you again to the extraordinary Rosie Perez and the extraordinary Jonathan Eig, helping us celebrate the extraordinary Muhammad Ali, coming at you on a special, extraordinary Social Justice Power Hour doubleheader. Now stay tuned for the equally extraordinary Adam Gopnik coming at you right now, true believers.